Night had fallen over the quiet village of Anjuri, but inside one small clay home, the silence was broken by a cry so sharp it could pierce bone. "Amale, what did you do to me?" The old woman, Mama Jovia, was on the floor, hands over her, face eyes wide and frightened. She blinked again and again, but all she saw was darkness. My eyes. Why is the world dark?" She rocked back and forth, weeping, her tears falling into the cracks of the red earth beneath her. The oil lamp burned above her head, throwing golden light across the room, but to her it was as if the sun had never risen. Amale, her only daughter, stood frozen by the doorway. Her breath came fast, chest rising like a drumskin pulled too tight. Her hands trembled at her sides. This was never supposed to happen. "Mama, I didn't mean," she choked. "You weren't meant to see that." Jovia turned her face toward the sound of Amale's voice. Though blind, her anger burned bright. "You think this secret will stay buried? I will not be quiet, Amale. I will tell the world what I saw." Amale's knees almost gave way. Her mother's words were knives. She rushed to the mat and picked up her phone with shaky fingers. She called the one person who had been with her from the beginning, the one who brought her to this path. "Zethu," she whispered when the call connected. She saw everything. On the other end, Zethu said nothing for a heartbeat. Then she replied, "I'm coming now. Don't let her leave the house." Within minutes, Zethu arrived, wrapped in a black shawl. She entered without knocking, carrying a small round gourd sealed with dried twine and red wax. "She knows," Amale said, voice barely holding together. "She cannot be allowed to remember," Zethu said calmly. "We'll use this. Blow the powder in her face. Her memory will vanish. She'll forget what she saw. What's inside? Dust from the forgetting tree and crushed roots from Intombo Hill," Zethu said. "Very old, very strong. Just one breath and her mind will turn to mist." Amale stared at her mother, who was now crawling along the wall, calling out to ancestors for help. Her heart was tearing apart. "She's my mother. She's also the one who will destroy everything you've built." Amale stepped forward. Her fingers untied the gourd seal. Inside was black powder, soft like ground charcoal. Her hand trembled as she held it close to her mother's face. "Forgive me," she whispered. Then she blew. The powder floated gently like ash in the wind. Jovia gasped. Her body shook once, then she went still. Her wild eyes blinked slowly. "What was I saying?" she mumbled. "Why am I on the floor?" "You fell, Mama," Amale said, voice thick with tears. "You're just tired. Let me help you." She guided her mother to the bed, tucked her in gently and sat beside her until she heard the slow, steady breath of sleep. When she stood up again, her legs were weak. Zethu stood in the corner, arms crossed. "It's done," she said. "Your secret is safe for now." Amale dropped to the floor. Her hands covered her face, but the tears still slipped through. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to blind her, but you wanted power, and now you have it." The next day, Amale made a decision. She could not stay in this village, not with nosy neighbors watching through every crack in their fences. Someone would see her mother's blindness. Someone would start asking questions. She sold the house quickly and moved her mother far away, to a white-painted villa on the hills of Mavoko, where the air was quiet and no one knew their past. The house had 6 bedrooms, high gates, and a fountain that sang in the courtyard. Amale hired 2 caretakers, silent women who didn't pry. She told them her mother had lost her sight from illness, and that was the end of the story. Meanwhile, Amale buried herself in work. She didn't just run her business, she ruled it. Her phone never stopped ringing. One contract after another, deals, more deals. She was the queen of stone and steel, building towers and shopping centers across 3 cities. People called her name with pride, Amal the Iron Lady. But in the quiet corners of her heart, she was still that trembling girl in a village hut. She had everything now. Fancy clothes from Accra, silk head wraps from Dakar, golden shoes from Lagos. But peace was a stranger. Some nights she'd wake up and check on her mother. Jovia never asked questions. She just sat in the garden, blind eyes turned toward the wind. Still, Amale worried. "What if the spell breaks?" she whispered to Zethu. "One night. It won't. Not unless she touches water from the sacred river." and she never will. But even Zethu's voice no longer comforted her. Something was changing. Amale felt it in her bones. Then one evening, life threw her a surprise. His name was Kwabena. She met him at a fundraising gala for orphaned children. Amale had spent years keeping her heart locked away, scared that anyone who got close would discover the darkness she had hidden. But when Kwabena came into her life, something in her spirit cracked open. He wasn't just wealthy or well-known. There was something deeper about him. The way he spoke gently. The way he listened without rushing. The way he smiled with his whole face. Kwabena was a man who could build buildings, but what he really built was trust. He admired Amale's strength. He loved how she moved with purpose, how her kindness touched people without effort. She tried to push him away at first, but he stayed, quiet, steady, kind. And slowly Amale allowed herself to love again. She cooked for him. She sent him messages at midnight. She ironed his shirts even though he never asked. She let herself dream of marriage, of peace, of a life where the past no longer followed her like a shadow. Kwabena gave her laughter, and in return, she gave him her guarded heart, but the past never sleeps for long. One night, Kwabena came home later than usual. His shirt was torn and his face was pale. "There was a man," he said, his voice thin. "He stood in the middle of the road, screaming. He threw rocks at my car." Amale's stomach dropped. "What did he look like?" "Wild," Kwabena said, shaking. "His eyes were sharp like they knew me, but I swear I've never seen him before." Amale tried to stay calm. "Maybe he mistook you for someone else, but—" Her hands clenched under the table. She already knew who it was. A few days later it happened again. Kwabena was visiting a building site when the same man appeared. This time he had a stick. He chased Kwabena across the site, yelling curses and threats. The workers managed to stop the man before anyone got hurt. Kwabena was shaken. He called Amale that evening. "It's the same man," he said quietly. "He keeps finding me. I don't understand why." Amale's voice shook. "Maybe he's just crazy, don't worry." But fear had already returned. That man wasn't random. He was a spirit from her past. He was the one who had given her everything, and now he wanted something back. The attacks continued. The man would appear outside Kwabena's office, on his way to the airport. Even once outside Amale's estate, standing near the gate with a smile that twisted like dry rope, Kwabena became paranoid. He stopped going out alone. He hired guards. But even that didn't stop the fear. Despite everything, his love for Amale grew stronger. Then one evening he took her to a quiet restaurant by the lake. The air smelled of roasted fish and wet grass. He held her hand across the table and smiled. "I want to spend my life with you, Amale," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she said without thinking. But as he slid the ring onto her finger, his body jerked, he gasped, then he screamed. Kwabena collapsed, his eyes rolling back, his mouth opening in a howl that shook the air. He thrashed on the floor, shouting words that made no sense. People rushed to help. Amale stood frozen. Her heart pounded in her ears. She knew what this meant. She ran through the night, tears rolling down her face. Her heart pounded as she burst into Zethu's house. Her voice trembled. "Kwabena, he's gone mad. It's happening because of me." Zethu stared at her in shock. "What? Are you sure?" Amale nodded. He screamed, fell to the floor, then started talking nonsense. "I saw it with my own eyes." Zethu covered her mouth, stunned. "Oh no, the spirit has taken him." The next morning the whole country knew. Young billionaire suffers sudden breakdown. Was it witchcraft? Jealous rivals or dark forces? Every headline screamed. The media wouldn't stop, everyone had a theory. But only Amale and Zethu knew the truth. Amale sat on the couch, scrolling through endless articles. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her phone buzzed with calls she couldn't answer. People wanted explanations, but she had none to give. Zethu paced the room. "You need to calm down." "Calm down," Amale snapped. "He's mad, Zethu." "Because of me? How do I fix that?" Tears flowed again, her voice cracked. "Everything is falling apart." "We have to go back," Zethu said quietly. Amale froze. "You mean Mwalimu?" Yes. He's the only one who knows how to fix this. Amale's whole body went cold. The thought of going back to that shrine made her chest tighten. But she had no choice now. The next morning they traveled far to the edge of the city. Beyond the trees and dusty roads sat the old shrine. Its roof sagged and smoke rose from the corners. The place smelled of burnt herbs and something rotten. Inside, the Kiroho man sat on the ground, legs crossed, waiting. "You returned," he said in a deep, gravelly voice. "But you didn't finish what I told you last time." Amale dropped to her knees. "Please, help me. The spirit is after Kwabena. He's gone mad. I don't know what else to do." The Kiroho man narrowed his eyes. "The spirit you welcomed into your life is not done with you. You promised yourself to him. Now you are trying to love another," Amale gasped. "So, the mad man chasing Kwabena, he's the spirit?" The man nodded. "He is your spirit husband. You made a pact for wealth. That came with a bond. And now he is angry you're giving your heart to someone else." Amale's breath caught. "What must I do?" The Kiroho man's lips curled slightly. "You must give him what is his. A child." Amale's mouth dropped open. "What?" "That is the only way to end the bond. Bear him a child, and he will leave you and Kwabena alone." Her body shook. "I can't do that." "You must," the man said darkly. "If you delay, the madness will consume Kwabena completely. He will never return." Amale collapsed forward, crying hard. "There has to be another way. Please, Mwalimu. Isn't there something else?" He looked at her, long and hard. "You made a choice when you came to me. Now the price must be paid." Outside the shrine, Zethu tried to comfort her, but Amale was lost in grief. Her mind screamed. How could she give herself to the spirit? How could she live with that? But how could she let Kwabena suffer for her mistake? Weeks passed. Kwabena's condition worsened. He was taken to a psychiatric hospital, locked in a quiet room with white walls. The doctors were confused. His brilliant mind had faded. He barely spoke. Amale visited every day. She held his hand and whispered to him, but he never responded. It broke her heart more each time. One night, as she sat on her bed staring at the walls, a sudden chill filled the air. Her lantern flickered. A dark figure stood at the foot of her bed. It was him, the spirit. But this time he wasn't angry. His eyes, wild and hollow, held sadness. "Why do you fight me?" he asked softly. "You came to me. You asked for help. I gave you everything. Now it's time to give me what you promised." Amale sat up, her voice shaking. "You ruined my life. You took my mother's sight. You made Kwabena mad. And now you want more?" The spirit stepped closer. "You chose this life, Amale. But if you give me what is mine, I will set you and Kwabena free." She sat in silence as the spirit disappeared into the shadows. The next morning, Amale made a decision. She couldn't let Kwabena suffer anymore. She called Zethu. "I'm going to do it," she said, her voice cold. "I'll give him what he wants, but after that, I want him gone forever." Zethu tried to change her mind, but Amale had made her choice. Later that day, she returned home. Mama Jovia sat in her chair in the living room, humming quietly. Amale tried to pass her without a word, but her mother spoke suddenly. "Don't do it." Amale froze in place. Her mother's words sliced through the air like a blade. Slowly, she turned around. "What did you say?" Mama Jovia's blind eyes were steady, as if they could still see her. "My spirit is heavy tonight," she said. "Something is wrong. Whatever you're planning, don't do it." Amale tried to smile. "It's nothing, Mama." But her voice trembled. "Don't let greed destroy you," Mama Jovia said softly. Amale forced a nod, then walked away. But her mother's words stayed with her. That night, as the wind rustled outside and the moon hid behind the clouds, Amale prepared herself. She lit a candle, sat on the edge of her bed, waited. Her heart beat like a drum. Then the memories came back, sharp and cruel. She remembered the first time the spirit came into her life. It was the night she trapped him in her room, following Mwalimu's instructions. She was told it would only be for one night, one dark act. Then she'd be free, but something went wrong. As she bound the spirit in chains, wild and half-conscious, her mother had arrived, unannounced. "Mama," she had whispered, stepping into Amali's house. Before Amali could stop her, Mama Jovia opened the door and saw it all. The spirit, the chains, the madness. The scream that came from her mother that night still echoed in Amali's ears. Her mother had fallen to the floor, shaking in disbelief. "Amali, what have you done to yourself?" Amali sat on the edge of her bed, holding the small pouch of spirit powder. It was meant to silence the demon that had haunted her life. A magic mixture made from ash, dried herbs, and the venom of a snake. It was supposed to blind the spirit man and wipe away his memory of her forever, but things had not gone as planned. That night, when she opened her bedroom door and saw Mama Jovia standing there, blind to the danger but still reaching out, confused and afraid, Amali had panicked. Her grip had loosened, her focus had shattered, and in her fear she threw the powder not at the spirit, at her own mother. The scream that followed was more than a sound, it was a wound. It pierced the walls, it pierced Amali's chest. And when the powder settled, Mama Jovia was on the ground, her sight gone, her life changed. The spirit had slipped away, untouched, laughing. For months, Amali tried to forget that night. She told herself the powder had been the only choice, that she had to protect her future. But now, as the spirit returned again and again, stronger than ever, she saw the truth. She had let him go. And now he had returned to collect. The air in her room was heavy. The candle beside her flickered with every breath she took. She felt the dread rising, filling her lungs, squeezing her ribs. Then, knock, knock. A soft tapping at the window. Amali turned her head slowly. There he was, the spirit man, pressed against the glass, his face twisted in a grin. His eyes glowed with a terrible hunger. He lifted his hand and tapped again. Amali moved like she was dreaming, her body stiff, her thoughts a mess. She opened the door. The wind rushed in behind him. "You've kept me waiting long enough," he said. His voice was smooth and cold, like the surface of a river at midnight. He stepped into the room without permission, without hesitation. He walked to her bed and sat, then lay back, then looked. At her, Amali didn't speak. She joined him. Not out of love, not out of desire, but out of desperation. She had made a deal, one she no longer understood, and this was the only way out. The room felt thick with shadows. The walls creaked. The lamp dimmed. She closed her eyes and let it happen. She whispered a silent prayer into the air, asking the ancestors to forgive her. When the sun rose, the spirit was gone. She sat up slowly, her hands shaking. Her body felt like it no longer belonged to her. She looked around the room. Everything looked the same, but inside she was broken. She picked up the phone and called Zethu. "It's done," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Zethu didn't speak for a while, then finally said, "I hope Mwalimu was right. I hope this ends it." Amali hoped so too. But hope is a dangerous thing. Weeks passed, then months. Amali began to feel changes inside her body. Her spirit, her energy, her heartbeat, it all felt different. She was pregnant. The news shattered her. A mix of terror and confusion filled her chest. The Kiraho man had said that only by giving the spirit a child could she break the bond. Only then would Kwabena be free from madness. Amali tried to believe it. She placed her faith in that promise. Meanwhile, Kwabena remained locked in the psychiatric ward, his mind lost, his words empty. Amali visited him daily. She brought his favorite music. She told him stories. She whispered his name, but he didn't come back. The deeper her pregnancy went, the stranger things became. She would wake up at night and find the spirit man standing at the end of her bed. He never touched her. He never spoke. He only stared at her belly, at her face, at her soul. His silence was worse than any words. Amali no longer smiled. The wealth she had gained meant nothing. Her clothes, her house, her cars, all of it, felt like sand. Her food tasted like ash. Her laughter had died. Even Mama Jovia could sense something was wrong. Though blind, her mother's heart was sharp. One evening, as Amali sat by her side, Mama Jovia gently reached out and placed her hand on Amali's stomach. "My child," she said, "how you are carrying a weight, not just in your body but in your spirit. I don't know what it is, But whatever it is, stop. Amali's lips trembled. Her throat ached. She wanted to speak, to explain, to scream. But she said nothing. She only nodded, wiped her tears in silence and walked away. Then came the storm, a wild, howling storm that roared across the land one night as Amali's body was gripped by pain. The sky lit up with lightning. The wind screamed through the trees. Amali cried out, her hands clutching her belly as she was rushed to the hospital. The labor was long, violent, and then quiet. As the baby was born, the thunder stopped. The rain calmed. The clouds opened. And for a brief second, Amali thought she heard laughter. Not a baby's laugh, a man's. The nurse handed her the child. "It's a boy," she said gently. But Amali couldn't even hold him. Her arms went stiff. Her eyes widened. The baby stared up at her, silent, cold. He didn't cry, not once. His eyes were too dark, too deep, too knowing. The nurse smiled. "He's beautiful." Amali only nodded. Inside, her soul screamed. Days passed. The child grew quickly, strong, quiet, but strange things began to happen. One night, after feeding the baby, Amali blinked, and suddenly she was no longer in her house. She was standing in a hallway of a hospital, of Kwabena's hospital. She looked down. She was barefoot, dressed in her sleeping wrapper. Her hands were shaking. She didn't remember walking there. She didn't know why she was there. She ran back home in confusion. Hours later, the news broke. Kwabena was dead, found murdered. In his hospital room, Amali dropped to her knees. Her heart nearly stopped. She looked at her hands. There were stains, dark ones, red ones, her pockets. She reached in and pulled out a knife, small, sharp, familiar. She dropped it to the floor, trembling. I didn't, she whispered. She had no memory of holding it, no memory of using it. She ran to her child's room. The boy was sitting upright, awake, eyes open, staring, unblinking. Amali's whole body turned to ice. She backed away slowly, heart racing. There was something in that baby's eyes, something not of this world. And as the wind blew through the hallway and the lights flickered above her, Amali knew one terrible truth. The child was not just hers. He belonged to something far more powerful and far more dangerous. Amali couldn't take it anymore. She picked up her phone with trembling hands and called Zethu. "I can't do this," she whispered, voice cracking. "Something's wrong. That child, he's not normal." On the other end, Zethu didn't even sound surprised. "You need to get rid of him," she said firmly. "Come to my place. We'll figure something out together." Amali didn't ask questions. She grabbed her car keys, wrapped the baby in a shawl, and rushed into the night. The roads were empty, the wind thick and heavy, but something went wrong. When Amali opened her eyes again, she wasn't on the road anymore. She was standing in front of Zethu's house. It was burning. Flames roared through the windows. Fire twisted and danced along the rooftop. The night sky glowed red with smoke and ash. Amali stood there in shock, a heavy can of petrol in her hand. Her knees buckled. She fell to the ground, the can rolling beside her. "No, no, this can't be," she cried. Inside the house she could hear screams, Zethu's voice, faint and dying. Amali sobbed, unable to move, unable to breathe. She had no memory of lighting the fire, no memory of pouring petrol. But the black stains on her hands and the smouldering can told her what her mind wouldn't. Zethu was gone, and she was the reason. Hours later, Amali arrived at the shrine, holding her child in her arms. Her hair was messy, her clothes smelled of smoke and fear. Her feet were dirty from running barefoot, but the shrine was silent, not the silence of peace, the silence of death. The place had been torn apart. Bowls were broken, symbols smeared, candles melted into puddles, and in the corner, Mwalimu's lifeless body. He was gone too. Amali stared in horror. The Kiraho man, the only one who could help her, was dead. Everyone who had tried to protect her, gone. everyone who knew the truth. Silenced, and deep inside she knew who was behind it all. She looked down at her child and trembled. She returned home slowly, her thoughts twisted into knots. The moment she stepped into the house, a chill swept through the air. Something had changed. She walked into the living room, and there was Mama Jovia, sitting tall, eyes wide open, looking directly at her. Amali froze. "Mama," she whispered. Her mother's voice was clear, calm, sharp. "The Kiroho man is dead," she said. "And with him, the spell that blinded me." Amali's hands dropped to her sides. Her mother could see again. Everything, the memories that had been locked away, were now rushing back. The horror, the betrayal, the blindness. Mama Jovia rose slowly from her chair. Her eyes didn't blink. "Amale," she said, "what have you done?" Tears filled Amali's eyes as she dropped to her knees. "Mama, I didn't mean to—" "You blinded me," her mother shouted. "Your own mother." Amali wept. "I was afraid. You had walked in that night and you saw the spirit. You saw the chains. I didn't want you to know. You stole my eyes," Mama Jovia said, her voice trembling with pain. "You took my sight. To protect your secrets?" Amali reached for her mother's hands. "I was desperate. I thought I had no choice." Mama Jovia looked at her, eyes heavy with grief. "Then tell me everything." And so, through sobs and broken words, Amali told her mother everything. The woman who first appeared at the market, the spirit deal, the promises, the rituals, the powder, the betrayal, the love, the curse. She told her about the hunger to escape poverty, about the pain of watching her mother struggle, about the deep longing to never feel helpless again. "I was just a girl," Amali said softly. "We lived in a one-room house. Every time it rained, we had to lift the mattress so the water wouldn't ruin it. You sold spices and groundnuts under the sun, while I dreamed of books and classrooms." Mama Jovia closed her eyes, memories rushing back. "I wanted to make things better," Amali said. "I wanted to give you a better life." "Even if it meant dancing with darkness?" Mama Jovia whispered. Amali nodded, ashamed. She told her. About the day everything changed. She had been sitting in their market stall watching the sun set with no sales made. Her mother was coughing beside her, too weak to even stand. They had no money left, no food, no hope. That's when the black SUV stopped in front of their stall. Out stepped a woman so radiant it felt like she carried the moon in her smile. She wore a golden wrapper, long beaded earrings, and perfume that smelled like honey and spice. Her voice was smooth like shea butter. Amali stared at her, captivated. The woman had looked around the stall, nodded, and then said, "You want a better life?" Amali had nodded, eyes wide with wonder. "Come to me tonight," the woman said. "You will never suffer again." Before leaving, the woman handed Amali an envelope of cash, enough to pay her mother's hospital bills twice over. That was the day Amali met Eshe, and Eshe led her to Mwalimu. She explained how Eshe showed her a world she didn't know existed. Mansions, gold, cars, silk, everything Amali had only seen in dreams. She followed blindly. First, she did small rituals. "Nothing dangerous," Mwalimu said, "just offerings." But then came the real demand. "You must be joined with a spirit," Mwalimu told her. "He will protect your wealth, and you will share your success with him." Amali didn't understand, but agreed anyway. And everything changed. The money flowed. Her name spread. Contracts arrived like rain. But then came the nightmares, the spirit, the madness, the child. Mama Jovia stood in silence as the words settled between them like, "Just then she spoke, her voice low, and when I saw him that night you blinded me, because you were afraid of the truth." Amala dropped her head in shame. The room was quiet until the baby cried. It wasn't a normal cry, it was sharp, cold, like a knife across skin. Both women turned. In the dim light, the baby's eyes glowed faintly. His mouth was open wide, but his body didn't shake like a real infant's. The sound was piercing, inhuman. Mama Jovia stepped back. "That child," she whispered. "He's not normal. Amale, He's not of this world. Amale nodded slowly, her eyes full of tears. No, Mama. He's the spirit's child, Mama, Amale whispered, her voice breaking as she looked at her baby. Mwalimu said giving birth to him would break the bond, but it didn't. He's only gotten stronger. Her eyes welled up. He's made me black out, Mama. I hurt Kwabena. I killed Zethu. I didn't even know I did it. Until it was too late. The baby, still and silent, began to cry, but it was no ordinary cry. The sound was high-pitched, unnatural. It pierced the air like a knife. It echoed off the walls like the wail of something ancient, something wrong. Then the cry turned into laughter. Sharp, wicked laughter that made the walls seem to shiver. Mama Jovia gripped Amale's shoulders. We need to end this. Now. Amale stood frozen, staring at the child in horror. His dark eyes glowed faintly in the flickering candlelight. He stared at her as if he could see inside her bones. His smile widened, too wide for his small face, and then he jumped from the crib, from stillness into motion, a knife in his tiny hand. Amale screamed, pulling her mother back. But their legs refused to move. They were stuck, paralyzed, as if the room itself was holding them down. The baby walked slowly toward them, each step deliberate. The blade shimmered in his hand, his face twisted with amusement. There was nothing human left in that face, only something that had worn her child's skin. Amale tried to move. She tried to scream, but her voice was stuck in her throat. The baby raised the knife. Then, a scream. Not from Amale, not from Mama Jovia, but from the child. Louder than before. The sound tore through the room like 1,000 spirits wailing at once. The blade dropped. His tiny hands clutched his head. He screamed again, a sound so dark it seemed to shake the house itself. A wind blew through the walls, knocking over frames and candles. Then the child began to shake, violently. His skin shimmered, glowing with strange light. And then, as quickly as it had started, it stopped. The baby froze in place. Then his body turned stiff and dissolved into black smoke, just like that, gone. Amale collapsed to the floor, gasping. Mama Jovia fell beside her, both women grabbing onto each other as the room finally returned to silence. What happened? Amale whispered, chest heaving. Mamas, what just happened? Before Mama Jovia could answer, the smell of smoke filled the room. Amale turned toward the kitchen. Flames were crawling up the walls. The fire spread fast, unnaturally fast. 1 second it was the curtain, the next it was the ceiling. They scrambled to their feet, stumbling out of the house just as it exploded into a blaze behind them. The fire swallowed everything, the rooms, the furniture, the photos on the walls. Every piece of Amale's luxury, all the wealth, all the splendor, burned to ash. She stood barefoot in the dirt, her arms wrapped around her mother, watching as her entire life turned to smoke. And then her cars caught fire. One after the other. Boom, boom, boom. Engines exploded, metal melted, glass cracked and shattered. Amale stood in silence, eyes wide with disbelief. Everything she had gained from the spirit was vanishing before her eyes. Beside her, Mama Jovia squeezed her hand tightly. This was never really yours, Amale, she said softly. The money, the cars, the clothes, they all belong to the darkness you let in. But you are still here, and so am I. Amale broke down, sobbing. I've lost everything, Mama. Everything. Her mother turned her to face her. No, you haven't lost yourself, and you haven't lost me. She pointed to the sunrise just breaking across the horizon. This is your second chance. Unbeknownst to them, miles away, the spirit who had haunted their lives, Kwabena's invisible rival, was lying broken on the side of a rural road. A speeding truck had struck him down. His death severed the last thread of the spiritual bond. The baby's sudden disappearance, the burning of Amale's riches, everything had been the result of that tie unraveling. It was over. The storm had passed, but the scars it left behind would remain. The next morning, Amale stood barefoot where her mansion used to be. The ashes were still warm. The air still smelled of soot and memories, but there was peace, a strange, quiet peace. Mama Jovia walked beside her, Her eyes filled with both sorrow and pride. "We will rebuild," she said, "but not with blood money, not with spirits, with truth, with love." Amale nodded, her face wet with tears, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. She had lost everything, but she had also been set free. Together they turned from the ruins and walked away, leaving behind the ashes of lies, pain, and darkness. They had no mansion, no riches, but they had something far greater, a new beginning, and the strength to write a new story. This tale, like many whispered under the full moon, carries a lesson. For all who listen, Amale's journey teaches us that the hunger for wealth can be a dangerous path, especially when guided by desperation. In trying to escape poverty, she turned to the unseen. She made a deal with the spirit, and that deal came at a price greater than gold could ever match. She lost people she loved, she hurt the ones who raised her, and for all the glamour and success she gained, she paid in pieces of her soul. But this is not a tale of punishment. It is a tale of awakening. Because Amale did what many cannot. She faced her mistakes. She told the truth. She let go of the curse instead of running from it. And in the end, she was given something far more valuable than luxury. She was given a chance to start again. So remember, beware of shortcuts that promise the world. If it costs you your peace, your spirit, or your mother's trust, it is not worth it. Some wealth is not a blessing, but a burden in disguise. Let your life be built not with lies, but with the strong hands of honesty, patience, and love, for these are riches no fire can destroy. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful African tales that will leave you speechless. Join the family and let the stories live on.